Hey, ghoul friends, it's me, Adrian, or Aiden. Either way, I am still your host, and you are still listening to Susto, the podcast of Ookie Spooky Scary... I almost messed that up. Ookie Spooky Scary Stories. I am so sorry. Okay, here's the thing. I'm going to be really honest with y'all. Are you ready? It is 11 o'clock at night, and I am just now recording this episode. It's Tuesday night, and this episode is supposed to go out on Thursday, but for those of you that are patrons, that's patreon.com/Susto for tons of amazing benefits. One of them is that you get the show 24 hours in advance. So that means that this is supposed to be going up at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning on Wednesday. However, I have quarantine brain and I lost track of my days apparently. And I was like, oh, la-di-da, there's nothing to do, not a care in the world. And then boom, it hit me. I have an episode that's supposed to come out tomorrow. So I'm working really hard to put this together. It's probably not going to come out at 8 a.m. And I am very sorry if you're a patron and you're supposed to be getting it at 8 a.m. But I want you to know that I'm aware, that I apologize, and I'm going to work very hard to get this out to you as early as I can on Wednesday. Keep in mind, I'm working from home with a pretty flexible schedule, and both of my classes are online without a scheduled meeting time. So pretty much, I'm allowed to wake up whenever I want. Do I take full advantage of that? Absolutely, every day. So, let's just, we're people. We're just people being real with each other. I'm being real with you. I'm letting you know that I'm taking advantage of this time to sleep in. But what I'm not going to do is ignore you. Okay. I still want to make this happen. So like I said, I'm going to try really hard to get this out as early as I can on Wednesday, but I do not want to be up into the middle of the night talking about, as you've guessed by the title of this episode, Satanic Panic. That's just not something I want to do to myself. But this episode is a real treat. Before I let you know why this episode is a treat, I'm going to remind you that if you have your own scary story or your own spooky content, like a photograph, an audio recording, a video, whatever it may be, there are many ways to get that to me. And you know what? I'm sure you already know what they are. Here, say them with me. Say them with me. You can leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and put your story in the review. You can email me at sustopodcast@gmail.com. You can send me a message on the Susto social medias at Susto Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. But yeah, that's pretty much I'm very easy to reach. So you can do that those ways. So for this episode, as you've seen, we're talking about Satanic Panic. I say we because I have a very special guest. So my guest for today's episode is Eduardo Martinez, also known as Pharr From Heaven. He does amazing work. He is a Barrio Historian, and he does some amazing work to preserve and share history about the RGV that oftentimes it's just completely overlooked, and we don't hear about so many of these stories. Again, Eddie is doing amazing work to document that history. He has his own Patreon, and you can find him Pharr From Heaven on Patreon. I'll probably leave links to it on the social media so that you can find him easy. I suggest that you go check that out. A few weeks ago, I saw that Eddie tweeted something from his Patreon that was about Satanic Panic in the RGV. And I was like, oh my God, that needs to be an episode of Susto. So Eddie was so gracious enough to actually agree to do an interview with me about Satanic Panic in the RGV. So we're going to be talking about that. And we're also going to be referencing a specific article that The Monitor published. And if you're not from here, The Monitor is a newspaper from the RGV. It's based out of McAllen, Texas. And they did an article on this on April 2nd of 1989. This was a year after the Mark Kilroy abduction and murder. So we dive into that. We dive into the context of the article. I'm going to, break the episode down for you so you can know what to listen out for. So after this introduction, you're going to hear the interview. After that, I'm going to read the first half of that article that we reference. If you want to read the entire article, that's only going to be available to my Ghoul Friends patrons that have access to the Google Docs, to the Susto Google Docs. So that's the only way you can access the whole article. But again, after the interview, I'll be reading the first half of that and I'll post it on the social medias as well. On top of that, there was like a sidebar story in the article by the same person that wrote the article. And as I was reading that story, it got like really spooky, and I was like, this would make an amazing episode. So this is actually going to be, I think, Susto's very first 2-part episode. So this is Satanic Panic Part 1, where we talk about that interview, and Satanic Panic Part 2, which will be the next episode of Susto, is going to be that sidebar story. I think it's a great story, so much so that I decided, obviously, to make this a 2-parter thing. So yeah, just to kind of break that down for you, I hope it made sense. I really enjoyed this interview. I'm so grateful and so thankful that Eddie agreed to do this. So make sure that you do check out his work, follow him on social media, because he's doing amazing work. And I cannot say that enough, because I think it's so important and I appreciate him for it. So without any further ado, we're going to get into it. Here is my interview with Eduardo Martinez, aka Pharr From Heaven, about the Satanic Panic in the RGV. Eddie, hello, hi. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me, Aiden. It's really nice to be here with you.
For really quick, just for anybody who might not know who you are in terms of your Barrio Historian background and the work that you do as Pharr From Heaven, would you like to share a little bit about that really quick, just so people know who we're talking with?
Okay. I guess many years ago I started writing about lots of different stuff here in the Rio Grande Valley, like historical stuff, sometimes music, culture. I've written in the Monitor newspaper, Festiva, a blog called Pharr From Heaven, and Neta, and most recently I write on a Patreon page also under Pharr From Heaven. And I guess I go over a little bit of everything, like conjunto music or like history about the Rio Grande Valley, like the Pharr Riot of 1971, which is a protest and riot against Pharr police brutality.
Yeah, just for anybody who isn't familiar with your work, I would highly suggest to you all that are listening to go and check out Eddie's Patreon. You have some really, really, really cool stuff, and it's unfortunately it's history and it's work that's overlooked a lot of the time, especially in public schools. And so I love seeing the things that you post, because it's stuff that I would have never come across had I not, I guess, known you or seeing people sharing your work. So I do highly suggest that people check out your work and follow your pages. One of the things that I did come across recently, and I was so excited because I was like, oh my God, this is a perfect opportunity to have Eddie come on the show and do his thing and talk about some history in the Valley, is you shared a link to your Patreon, and it was about a story about a conference in McAllen, Texas, that was in response to the Satanic Panic that was pretty prevalent in the 80s, everywhere, but it was also happening here.
Yeah, it was interesting. Yeah, I was curious about what was happening in the Valley during that time, because, as we know, the Satanic Panic was everywhere in the nation, and I was able to find the story in the Monitor in 1989 that if people find the newspaper, they'll be able to see that they include this image of an upside down cross with a pentagram and 666, and the Monitor talked about how it's a sign of satanic activity here in the Pharr San Juan Alamo area. So it was really interesting finding the story. Yeah, about this. I guess to start things off, it was this large conference that was being held in McAllen, Texas. I'm not sure exactly where. I don't think the article mentions where it happened, what location. But yeah, it was in McAllen, Texas, in March 1989, and that they gathered hundreds of high school counselors, law enforcement officials, and psychologists to the conference to tackle this issue of satanic worship in South Texas.
Yeah, and I was able to find that newspaper clipping too, and I was talking to you about it last night because I wanted to read through it so that I wasn't just coming into this 100% unaware of the story that you were referencing. And I remember even telling you last night too, as I was reading through some of it, I was like, oh my God, this is so cheesy. It's kind of a little funny, some of the things that they were saying. And there's also there's an accompanying story with that, it was the article about, the general, that panic that was happening in the area. But the same writer of the article also wrote a second story focusing on certain individuals that they claim here to be from the Valley. And as I was reading that, I was like, holy crap, it's a little comical at some point, almost I guess some of the wording that they use. But it was the 80s, it's different. So it was a little bit funny to me, but then actually looking at the context of the story, I was like, oh, wow, this is really intense. And then it made me think of Mark Kilroy, which had happened in, I think it was 88. It was just the year before, right?
Yeah, it was like around that same time period. And that was like, I think, a big reason too why like the Satanic Panic hit really hard here in the Valley, because they could point to that story as something that happened here, like in Bronxville, Matamoros area. And I think that story like freaked out a lot of people, and that is a really scary story. Yeah, to people that aren't familiar about Mark Kilroy, who was like this kid who was on spring break and was abducted by Sarah Aldrete, and I can't remember the other guy's name. By any chance, do you happen to remember?
I'm not sure if he did I don't think well, I know the leader of the cult was Constanzo, but I forgot who. I'm not sure if it was him or if it was another one of their cronies that like actually did the abducting. Yeah,
I think you're right. Yeah, like I think it was like one of the cronies that did the abducting, and that's like a really sad story too. And there's like this corrido. Let me see if I always forget the name of the corrido, but I want to mention it so people can look it up. Yeah, the name of the corrido is Tragedia en Matamoros, Tragedy in Matamoros, and it's by this band called Los Suspiros de Salamanca, and people can find it on YouTube. And I know this actually got like national attention when this corrido came out, because like it wraps up that whole story like in that really like colorful corrido language, and like it's easy to digest for people that want to learn the story really quickly.
Yeah, I've never heard of that song, but I'm definitely going to listen to it, and maybe I'll put like a little clip of it here in the podcast too, so that people can hear that. Son los meros responsables de todo lo que ha ocurrido. When you were looking into this story specifically about this conference and all the people that were involved, did you happen to find like any other stories that may have not been referenced in the Monitor article about like, I guess, satanic practices in the RGV? Or even like while you weren't looking for that one specific story, have you actually ever heard other like, I guess, incidences or like concerns from city like officials or anyone about, that idea happening here in the Valley?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, like originally, actually, the reason why like I ended up stumbling upon this was because I heard that there was like this satanic church in Pharr, but that was kind of like mysterious, and that like people were worried about it, but nobody really knew like what the people actually believed. Like one time I wrote about it on my old Pharr From Heaven blog, and so many different people commented with different stories, being like, oh yes, like it was this, like evil satanic church, and then other people were like, oh no, they're just like a different face, but they didn't like they weren't doing anything right. But it ended up happening like around the same time, which is how I stumbled upon the story. It was like in the spring of 1989, where like that church ended up being like set on fire, and nobody ended up finding out what was the reason for the arson. And it was kind of like this mystery story that I remembered from my childhood, because I remember my older brother telling me when I was a kid that like, oh, like there was this satanic church, and people were scared of it, so people like set it on fire to get rid of it. And that was like that was like a wild rumor story that was like going around like in Pharr when I was a kid. So I ended up finding like a picture of the church, and I'll share the picture with you, so you could share it like when you post this up.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's just wild, but like the Monitor doesn't make reference to those rumors and those stories, but that was definitely, I remember the story in Pharr at the time that people were definitely worried that there was like satanic worship going on in that church, and people in the Pharr community wanted to get rid of it, and that was like their way to get rid of it.
Wow. Yeah. I think I was going through some of your posts, and I saw that story. You actually do have something of that on your Patreon as well, right?
I think I do, but like this pandemic like Like, I remember
that's fine. But just because what I wanted to reference about that was I remember seeing you post something about that, and the reason I remembered it is because it had such conflicting stories that you had wrote that, like, yeah, you had heard a lot of people that would say, like, yes, this church was pure evil. It was a satanic church, and like no one should go there. But then apparently you were also getting conflicting reports from other people that were like, no, like that it was just a regular church. It was good. It was fine. And it kind of all tied up into, I guess, like a nice package for me, because in the article about the Satanic Panic in the Valley, one of the things that they wrote was that apparently at the time, I don't know if it still happens, but that Satanists and satanic churches, they depended on that sort of uncertainty of people believing them or not. And so that was another thing I wanted to ask was, in all this research that you've done and anything like paranormal that you've found related to the Valley, because I know this isn't the only one, is that always like a common thing that there's not even just like different versions of a story, but they're like completely conflicting?
I think so, yeah. Like, because even going back to the Mark Kilroy story, like, I know, like, it ended, like, there had already been reports and people had already been talking for a while that, like, this stuff was going on, and there was conflicting stories, and unfortunately, like, the story, like it's kind of almost, like, sad, because, like, it didn't get, a lot of people didn't start caring until what happened to Mark Kilroy, which is a tragedy, obviously, right? But other people had already been, like, killed too previously to that, but, like, for whatever reason, like, or just, like, the way society is then and today, like, the people that were being killed or sacrificed, like, they're, like, you know, lower income people, some were sex workers, and, like, and so police and other officials didn't look into it, but, like, so I guess that's, like, an example of how, like, there's conflicting stories of people being, oh, like, there's nothing going on there, or not caring, and then once it happened to Mark Kilroy, like, everybody started, like, noticing and investigating what was actually happening.
Exactly. I mean, and we're going to be honest, and you can say it on my show, because I share that belief too. Like, it's like once it happens to a white person, then it matters. Then it's like, then it's important all of a sudden. And that was something else in the article. Let me pull it up really quick. That I read at one point, I think towards the end here, they start talking about how, like, there's influences of, like, African religion and African rituals, and they're making their way into our innocent Christian communities. And I was like, okay, at some point this article just got really weird and was like, the Africans are bad and their religion is wrong. And I was like, I'm not sure, like, I want to completely trust what this article is saying. It's like another kind of fear, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, is that, you know, and I've talked about this before on the show, where a lot of things that people are scared of, they happen out of like ignorance, and not just like passive ignorance, like, oh, like I just didn't know. It's like it a lot of like true like hardcore fear that people often will like weaponize is like willing and like encouraging that ignorance, and like, no, like, I don't understand, like they referenced in this article, I don't understand these African traditions and rituals. So you know what? They're bad and they're satanic. And I think that's something that also we see a lot in, obviously, like everything, but it's something that I see a lot with scary stories, and I heard a lot in the stories that we were told growing up.
Yeah, now that you mentioned that, I think of this is a really good documentary called Southwest of Salem that's like about towards the end of the Satanic Panic, which is like, this is already like a few years after the peak, which was, this documentary takes place in 1984, and it's about, these 4 women, they're queer women, and they all get like accused of being, satanic worshippers and like doing these like, abusive things to kids, and, they were all like innocent, they didn't do anything at all, but, the community there and like police officers and like some men that were just after them, they like put this all on them just like out of like ignorance and hate, and to like to punish these women just because they're different, or they didn't want to like go along with what these men were asking them to do. And so it's like really horrifying, like the way like sometimes like this has been used against women, queer people, black people, indigenous people, poor people. So like it's really sad and scary. And so I would recommend the documentary Southwest of Salem to anybody.
Southwest of Salem.
And in the documentary, for a little bit, there's this person called Debbie Mason who comes out, who she briefly worked at NETA, and she also wrote a really good, well, I haven't read it, but I heard it was really good. I think it was a really good book about the Satanic Panic. So I'm kind of curious to read that one day.
Wow. And I was going to mention to you too, and this is a little, I guess, I don't know if I'll include this, but either way, on like a personal level also, I messaged you last night that I had emailed the UTRGV archives, who were as helpful as they could be. I was really appreciative of them. And also in this article that we're talking about, the Monitor article, they say that the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council at the conference, they presented this booklet. And let me read it right here. I can read it word for word. And you're going to kind of maybe chuckle at this, why I'm so adamant about reading it word for word. But it says here, according to a Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council booklet entitled Community Awareness of Brujeria and Satanic Worshipping, and then they go on to quote the booklet. I was so hoping that I could find like a copy of that booklet or something. And I emailed UTRGV archives, and they did have a container of the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council, like reports and publications from that year. They actually had from 1989. So I was really excited because I was like, there's a chance. But unfortunately, I got an email today that they did not have what I was looking for. And I'm like super impressed with them because I've never used the archive services at UTRGV. They went a step further, and they actually called the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council to ask about this. And in the email to me, they said that they spoke with one or two people from there, and they said the persons they spoke there, I guess, shared that they had been with the Development Council since like 2002, and they went on to say that the Development Council had never published anything of the sort, and they would never publish anything with that title. And I was like, okay, I'll accept that. But the Monitor straight up said in 1989, and I'm looking at the article, that you all published this booklet. So I'm going to include this in the show because I want it. I want you to have it as well, Eddie, because I think you could do some really cool stuff with this. But I mean, this is a public call. Anybody in the Valley or from the Valley that has any sort of like pull or connection or may have heard of this booklet, please. Like, I'm just like I'm throwing it out into the universe and hoping someone tosses it back to me because that would be so cool to see. But that's an example of one of the things of many of the things that are referenced in this article that like some of them seem unreal. And even like when they're saying this group, which still exists today, published this thing, and we tried to reach out to them, they were like, that's ridiculous. We would never. And I'm like, part of me is like, I can't blame them for having that reaction, because if somebody told me that, I'd be like, what are you talking about? No. So just unfortunately, we don't have that yet.
Wow, that's so wild. I'm so glad that you reached out and found this out, because it's kind of like, it's, I can't think of another expression, but it's just kind of funny, I guess.
Yeah, no, it was funny. Like, I got the email and I was like, what? I was like, and that's because I sent them the clipping like of the article that had that, and I highlighted it and I emailed it to them, and I was like, just so you know, this is what I'm referencing. This is what I'm talking about. So you don't think that I'm just some like random like person with no like basing or like no sources. Like, I don't know. I was hoping it would like in some like way like validate my request, but yeah, all I can say is from what I took from that experience is that if you have access to the UTRGV archive services, you should definitely hit them up because they were really great.
That's so cool. Yeah, I've had previous experiences with them, and they're really great, and they're super helpful with like all your questions and whatever you're looking for.
So with all of this talk of like the Satanic Panic that happened, and we know that these things they had already been happening, like the Constanzo cult, like we mentioned earlier, and that I talk about in the episode about Mark Kilroy, they didn't just pop up overnight. They had roots here in the Valley. They had roots in Mexico. And from what I found in my research for that show, they largely followed a religion called Palo Mayombe. And it has roots, and it's kind of related to like Santeria and like voodoo. And that's the best that I can describe it. I'm sure that there's a better way to describe it. And that might be the easiest way for other people who have never heard of it to understand it. But so the point, I guess, that I'm trying to make is that, this kind of behavior, whether we think of it as something that's like outlandish or we think that it's just another facet of science fiction, like there are serious, I guess, there's serious things happen as a result of these beliefs. Whether it's people hosting a conference in, I guess, like as like Christian warriors against it, or it's people being abducted and then the story is not going big until it happens to someone that American deems, I guess, worthy of covering their story and trying to, get the word out about them. So we know that it's been happening it happened way before 1989. Do you think, and this is kind of a big question, do you think that Satanism is still alive in the Rio Grande Valley?
Not really sure. But I think it's interesting because during this conversation, I had blocked this memory out for 20 years. Right now, it just popped into my mind.
I'm so sorry.
It's more of an interesting memory than like a negative or bad memory. But my mom was dating this man named Raul, nicknamed Bayo, and I always remember this. Well, now I remembered it because it was a memorable story from my childhood that I had forgotten. But he was undocumented, so sometimes he would go back to Mexico and he would come back through the river. And he had a story, and he claimed 100% that it was real. And he was so genuine in talking that I kind of don't doubt him. But also the story is really wild. That he claims that in South Pharr that when he was coming back to the U.S. that he stumbled upon this ranch barn area, and that he noticed that there was a human sacrifice going on, and that
oh my god,
and he was saying that it was the scariest thing he had ever seen, and that it freaked him out, and he couldn't take his eyes off of what was happening. And he was just observing this, and it was almost like he was paralyzed, kind of just looking into this sacrifice. And then eventually, when it stopped and the men that were doing that left, he just rushed off, panicked, and came back more up to North Pharr area. But he was very insistent that oh no, I didn't imagine this, I'm not making this up. He was this happened, and that he saw it. And this was around 1999, 2000 era. And it's wild, because it's a story that I had forgotten since I was a kid. But I remember when I was a kid, it was a big story. And he was no, this really happened, and it really scared me and freaked me out.
Yeah, that sounds terrifying to stumble, because I've heard stories of people exploring cemeteries, there's this, just my experiences because it's where I grew up, but the cemetery that's in Ed Couch, or that big abandoned mansion that's in Monte Alto. I've heard stories of people exploring there, and they find an altar or an offering or something, and they're it was witchcraft and I was scared and I left. But I can't imagine seeing an actual ritual happen with people happening, and I would be paralyzed too, and that is terrifying. But that is, wow, that is, it's interesting to think that these kinds of things might still be happening. It's sad because I don't want people to be hurting other people. But in the same vein, of course, that's why I do this show, is because I think it's still it gives me that like my light bulbs go off and I want to know what's happening. So oh my gosh, you've given me some amazing Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that story, or even like any of your own like personal like spooky experiences that you'd like to share? Like I would love to have that as well.
As far as like just personal stuff, I remember like just the elementary school I went to, View Elementary. That was just really early school here in the PSAA area. It was like the Mexican school back when it was like segregated here in Pharr, San Juan Alamo, and the stories go that school was always like really haunted and really scary. And I can't say that I like experienced anything in particular at school, but I know those were the stories, and there was like always this eerie feeling going to the restroom. That was like one thing that like was kind of noticeable, where like the restrooms were so old. They were from the 1920s, so like they did have kind of like an eerie kind of weird feeling. And like I know we didn't like going to those restrooms much, and we were happy when they built newer restrooms, and and they didn't have that spooky feeling.
It's always the restrooms, right?
Yeah.
I don't know like, what it is, because we had that too, like in our elementaries here in Ecatchelsa. It was always like that. There was always some story about the restrooms, and like the restrooms are haunted. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, like there is just something about the restrooms, and like it's like this popular. I've learned later that I guess it's like a popular story that like kids tell or adults tell the kids, but that like in the restroom that there's like this like thing called like La Mano Pachona, which is like,
oh my god, you just like unlocked everything like before like 2000 for me. Oh my god, wow.
Yeah, like evil hand there that like scares children.
Oh my god. That is I need to find a story on the Mano Pachana so I can do that one, because wow. I remember hearing stories about that, and then like the Addams Family came out and I lost my shit. I was like, it's real. It's real because other people know about it.
Yes, it was like wild. And I remember, the story itself would always scare me, because I was like, oh man, I hope it doesn't pop out, when I go to the restroom. Like,
oh my god. Wow. Oh man. So, okay, just before we do like I guess like an exit for this for you for the show, was there anything else about that story or that article specifically that you wanted to include, or maybe correct, maybe I got something wrong, or
just that it's like a really interesting story, because like it's kind of like a story that I think is kind of somewhat connected to the Mark Kilroy story, because obviously that was something that really happened, that's really scary and terrifying, and that like lots of like several people lost their lives in that story. But then there's like this other aspect where like people are like worried about like Dungeons and Dragons and like children's cartoons, and it's like it's almost like a different kind of reaction that I thought was interesting, where like I guess thinking about it, it's like a weird kind of connection where like I could understand like people being worried or panicking. Like I remember also my brother telling me that like in 1989 that like at some point I don't know if it was like after Mark Kilroy, or maybe it was like around near this conference, that like some parents took their children out of school just like for a few days, so they were worried that something bad was going to happen.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting, because I wonder like if this was tied into like maybe like parents or older people like panicking and not knowing the right way to deal with an issue, so like they decided to like have conferences and go after these like games and cartoons when like maybe the issue is something else entirely.
Yeah, no, that is so perfectly put. I love that. All right, man. Well, Eddie, thank you so much for doing this. It's about time that you were on the show, because I truly I value the work that you do, and I think it's really cool, and I think more people should know about it. So if people wanted to look for you on the internet, where could they find you?
They can find me first like on my Twitter, which is Pharr From Heaven, Pharr, and then From Heaven, and they can find me on Instagram too, and on Patreon.com they can also find me under Pharr From Heaven. So that would be the easiest way people can find me.
Awesome. And I'll also be sure to include those links whenever I post this on Instagram and Facebook. And I'm super grateful and I'm super thankful that you agreed to do this interview. It was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Cool. Thank you so much, Aiden. I had like a really great time, and it was so awesome talking to you again. I hope you have a great night, and I hope all the listeners do have a great night as well.
Okay, and I'm back. I had to let you all know that before we did the interview, Eddie and I were talking about like, how's this going to go? You know, I hadn't really prepared anything. I told Eddie that he didn't have to prepare anything. So the conversation that you all heard was like 100% on the spot. So that just goes to show how much Eddie knows about these kinds of things, how much research and how much work he puts into it. And again, I cannot compliment him enough on the work that he does because it is amazing. And if you missed it during the interview, again, make sure that you go check out his Patreon, Pharr From Heaven. I'm going to leave that link on the social media so that you all can check it out. And we're going to go ahead and move on. So I'm going to go ahead and read part. So it looks like it's the first half of that article that we referenced throughout the interview. And if you are a patron on Patreon, and if you're at least the second tier, so the Ghoul Friends tier, you're going to have access to the full article. It's going to be in the Google Doc and you can read the entire thing. I'm going to go ahead and read that for you now. So it says, officials fear Satanism on the rise here. Editor's note, the following article may seem bizarre. For some, it will be unreal. It is public skepticism, however, that Satanists count on, because the horrors of oaths and rituals, cannibalism, human sacrifices, and other crimes associated with satanic worship are too ghastly for most people to deal with. The subject remains obscure and untold. Nevertheless, the following story and sidebar are based on facts gathered in an intense monitor probe and from information received from individuals investigating devil worship. So again, that sidebar is what's going to be on the next episode. It continues. The stories explore what has been called America's best kept secret. And this is by Arturo and Longoria. And it was published on April 2nd in 1989 in the Monitor. There's a picture here and you'll see this online. It's satanic symbols. These symbols were spray painted on the wall of a storage building that apparently was used as a satanic ritual site. It has a little bit more there, but you can see that once I post this on the social medias. When about 200 high school counselors, law enforcement officials, and psychologists gathered in McAllen last week to learn about satanic worship, a sense of urgency permeated the meeting. A lot of people are really scared about what's going on in the valley, one police officer observed during a 15-minute break. A sudden, dramatic rise in satanic worship throughout the valley has forced officials to come to grips with the problem. At least one recent suicide is believed to have been connected to the practice. And in addition, official sources, as well as informants engaged in Satanism, fear the valley has become a transit zone for smuggling individuals, primarily children, from Latin America to northern states where they are used in pornographic films and as human sacrifices in satanic rituals. I just want to make a note on this. So in the last few days, this story came out that apparently detainees in ICE custody were being given hysterectomies without their consent. And if you haven't heard what a hysterectomy is, that's fine. A quick explanation for it, I guess, is basically it's a removal of the uterus. So they're removing the ability to become pregnant and have children from people that are under ICE custody. And again, this is without their consent. This is after giving them confusing language. I read one of the articles and it was saying that like there was gaps in communication. They weren't fully, they being ICE employees and certain medical professionals, not giving, I guess, like a description or just not being honest with them and not telling them what they were about to do to them. And you may have also seen there was this hashtag like Save the Children that was being taken over basically by like weird racist like Trump supporters that were hijacking essentially that hashtag and using it for something else. And so the connection that I'm trying to make there is that yes, like I said earlier, this turned out to be a very serious ordeal and some terrible things happened out of it. But we cannot always say, well, those are the Satanists, so they're just terrible, bad people and nobody else is. Because a lot of the time, the real monsters are people that are in power. And again, if you haven't heard me talk like this on this show, I'm not sure, you might have just missed it. It might have gone over your head, but I've tried to say it plainly many times before. Again, when I was reading this right now, that just like, it popped into my head because in this article, it seems that the community is so concerned for like children and human trafficking, and we have to save these children. But a lot of these same people become very silent when it comes to immigrants, when it comes to undocumented people, when it comes to people of color. You know, I just wanted to make that a very sharp point for you to think about if you haven't thought of yet. So sorry to bum you out if I bummed you out, but maybe you needed to be bummed out real quick. So we're going to continue, and I'm going to stay on track this time. It says, several Valley schools are overwhelmed with the amount of satanic graffiti and related paraphernalia that students are bringing onto campuses. At least one school recently issued a rule forbidding any clothing with satanic graffiti, posters, or jewelry. I actually remember this. I was not going to high school in the 80s or the 90s, but I do remember this being a very specific rule. And it's interesting to think that this may have been where it started, was that we couldn't wear anything like that was deemed satanic or demonic. So just, I don't know, something to think about for me, I guess. It continues, as a recent Monitor investigation confirmed, satanic worship is not new to the Valley. Investigators claim that as early as 1973, satanic graffiti was appearing on the walls in the McAllen area. Rumors also began to crop up concerning secret rituals in abandoned buildings. From its early beginnings in South Texas, Satanism has evolved into a violent and relatively well-organized subculture. Now, covens in the San Antonio and Corpus Christi areas reportedly have infiltrated Valley schools as well as other parts of the local community. As one police officer warned, if we get a strong satanic leader here in the Valley, like they've got in Corpus Christi, it's going to be terrible. So Eddie also put this question out for his followers. I'm going to put the same question out. If anybody knows who this satanic leader in Corpus Christi was around like the 80s, write in and let me know, or let Eddie know. Or if you let me know, I'll let Eddie know. And Eddie, if they let you know, you'll let me know. But essentially, we're just curious to see, like, I want to know more about them. I want to do a little bit more research on them because they're connecting them to the activity in the Valley. This continues. Evan Peterson of the San Antonio-based Exodus Outreach Center and one of the lecturers at the McAllen conference explained, I don't know how much more serious this issue can be, because it deals with the decay and decline of our youth. Today, we are raising first, second, and even third generation Satanists. One of the problems in dealing with the problem is that satanic worship is not illegal. It's protected in the Constitution under freedom of religion. It only becomes illegal when specific laws are violated. What is it that Satanists believe? According to a Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council booklet entitled Community Awareness of Brujeria and Satanic Worshipping, most Satanists believe in reincarnation or in no afterlife at all. Again, in the interview, you may have heard me reference this booklet, and word for word, I'll read it again. It says, according to a Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council booklet, the Lower RGV Development Council is an organization that still exists. Like I said, I tried reaching out to them via the UTRGV archives. They said they couldn't find anything and that they wouldn't publish that. But if anyone has any leads on that, please let me know. Again, the booklet was called Community Awareness of Brujeria and Satanic Worshipping. I would love to see this booklet and like get my hands on it and flip through it and see what was going on. But I will rest that there. So this continues, we're almost done. Most believe Satan and Lucifer are separate beings. Most believe they are evil and want to be so. In fact, set about seeing to the reality of that fact. There is a hopeless, desperate, selfish, violent, and then it says, see Satanism, page 14a. So, sorry to lead you on like that and tease it like that, but essentially, the rest of this article just kind of delves a little bit more into the culture of Satanism in the Valley. Like Eddie and I talk about in the interview, they go on to say how it's an influence of like the music that the youth, quote unquote, were listening to at the time. And it's an influence of African culture for some reason, that it was like African culture's fault that there was Satanism in the Valley and that people here were adopting rituals from that culture. So again, if you missed it, we do talk about in the interview. And I just thought the whole thing was interesting. Again, you can find the rest or this article in its entirety on Susto's Patreon. It'll be available for the second and third tiers where the Google Doc is available for you. But if not, I'll just post this first half and it'll be up there on social media as a picture. So you can check that out there. Okay, y'all, thank you so much for tuning in. If you are a patron who has early access to the episodes, I am really sorry if I'm getting this out to you later than I should have. Normally, I like to have it out a full 24 hours in advance, which means it would be out 8 a.m. on the Wednesday before the Thursday that it comes out for everybody else. So if I am getting this out to you late, I'm very sorry, but I am going to make sure that it comes out on Wednesday. One more time, I'm going to remind you all to tune into the next episode so that you can hear part 2 of this one, where I'm going to read the sidebar or the story that Arturo Longoria, who wrote this article, writes about specific individuals and their experiences with Satanism here in the Valley. And that one has a little bit more of like a creepy tone. So that's why I decided to dedicate a whole episode to it. But again, you'll hear that in part 2, which will be in 2 more weeks. One last time, if you have your own scary story or your own spooky content that you want me to share, you already know how to do that. You know how to do it. Social medias at Susto Podcast, email sustopodcast@gmail.com, patreon.com/sustopodcast. Leave it in a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Hope you liked this episode. Again, I really enjoyed it. Again, make sure to check out Eddie, Pharr From Heaven on Patreon. Give him a follow on social media as well. And again, thank you to you for being here. I hope you all are doing well. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other. And I will talk to you later. Stay out of trouble, okay? Bye.